Welcome to A Dad's Path, where we navigate the heart and science of parenting. Each episode, we tackle issues that dads everywhere face and deliver actions you can take right away. Join us as we uncover the balancing act of raising resilient, loving kids. Visit us at adadspath.com to learn more. Ready for the journey? Let's begin.
Welcome to another episode of A Dad's Path podcast. I'm Will Braunstein. Today I'm here with Michelle Icard. Michelle has a degree in education and has worked with parents, children, and teachers for more than 20 years. She creates curriculum, books, and programs that help them better understand and navigate early adolescence, which are tough years indeed. Michelle is the author of 3 books on this subject, 8 Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success, What to Do and What to Say to Turn Failures into Character-Building Moments, 14 Talks by Age 14, the essential conversations you need to have with your kids before they start high school. These are great conversation topics, by the way. And Middle School Makeover, improving the way you and your child experience the middle school years. Michelle is a writer for the Today Show parenting team, NBC News Learn, CNN Science and Wellness, and the Washington Post. Her work has also been featured in the Chicago Tribune, Christian Science Monitor, Redbook, Time, and People. She is an expert. And her leadership curriculum for middle schoolers is called Athena's Path and Hero's Pursuit, has been implemented at schools and summer camps across the United States. So really excited about this conversation. You can learn more about Michelle at her website, michelleicard.com. We'll put that in the show notes. But in the meanwhile, let's get going. Welcome, Michelle.
Hey, Will. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us. This is I've been really excited for this conversation. Your books are just super interesting. They're great topics and things that you don't necessarily, both are, you have 3 of them, but the 8 Setbacks and 14 Talks are things that, as parents, we know we're going to have to address. And it's a lot nicer to look at them before you have to address them, or even if, while you're in it, so you have some answers and guidance as a parent. So I am excited for this.
I'm happy to hear that. I really hope that the books feel prescriptive and that they feel simple and you can run to them and get a quick answer as needed. So I'm so glad that those topics resonate.
Yes, no, that's fantastic. So I want to start. What inspired you to focus on adolescent development and parenting? And maybe how did your personal or professional experiences shape your approach?
Well, I love that question because I think that the answer is it's really anecdotal. There's nothing I can point to say, something specific, except that I was a child who had some chaos in my early childhood, and my family life was unpredictable at times. And all the things that come with growing up in that kind of a setting, I turned my focus to observing families. I really wanted to see how other families operated and how they worked. And so really my entire life I have studied family. And then when I got to college and was able to focus on that, English and education were my academic pursuits, and I was interested in the story of family, and I was interested in how people learn. And so from there, I just took my interest in a very practical route. I lost my job when Arthur Andersen folded, and the whole company folded up in that Enron scandal. And I was among 80,000 employees without a job all of a sudden. And I had a 2-year-old and I was pregnant, 7 months pregnant. And so I said, I've got to come up with my own job here because I don't think anybody's going to hire me today at 7 months pregnant. And I started a tutoring business, and I worked mostly with middle schoolers. And that really drew me into the social emotional lives of kids in early adolescence.
Wow, that's really interesting. Was there a formative moment or couple moments from your childhood that you can think of that really brought this career to life for you as you look back?
I have a favorite memory from 9th grade. We had to write for a creative writing teacher. We had to write a 2-page autobiographical piece. And so I wrote about an experience that I had as a child when my parents separated, and I turned it in, and we had a really hard teacher. He was known for having outbursts. He was very dramatic in a sort of like, picture a New England prep school creative writing teacher in the 80s. So like no holds barred, throwing things across the room as he felt like it. So I was terrified. So I turned in my 2-pager, and it came back with all of these marks all over it. And I thought, all I want to do is be invisible. I don't want him to see me. I don't want him to scream. And there were marks all over it. But at the top, he had written, "You are a writer," period. And that moment for me, I thought, gosh, I've never known who I am. And I can't believe you see who I am. And it felt like I was so delighted for someone to tell me when I was really clueless about who I was, that that's what I could be. And that maybe that's who I was at heart. So that certainly was a formative, young adolescent memory that I have with such fondness. I recall with such fondness.
That's great. No, that does sound inspiring. I'm thinking of like Robin Williams and Dead Poet Society, or kind of
Totally that
intensity.
sort of vibe, like tweed sport jacket with leather patches on the elbow and all of it.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, classic. So, how old were you when your parents separated? And I wonder if you could give an example of something that you think they did really well, and then maybe something that was a learning experience as you counsel other parents, maybe who would be going through a separation.
Yeah. My parents did not separate well. They did not at all. So when I was 6, my mom came home and said, "Get in the car." And then on the way out said, "We're never going back." So that is a bad way to separate. That was really traumatic. And I had siblings who I didn't see after that, half sisters. So that was a jarring experience that forms a lot of things in my life now. So I can remember talking to a therapist years later and her saying to me like, "Huh, that's not actually how adults should handle a situation like that." And I was like, really? I'd never thought that it could be done a different way. I just assumed you just left, right? So I do think that the lesson there is that there is space for children to understand what you need to talk about, and that you as you're able, you really do need to at least communicate, so that this is going to happen.
Mhm.
And that's probably not something that most people need telling, but in my situation, it happened and was not good. My parents did some things really well. My mom remarried when I was 8, and I call my stepdad my dad. And their relationship was also complicated, but they balanced each other well. And so I think I gained a lot of stability that I didn't have prior to that age. So yeah, I think they're sort of they definitely brought my needs sort of front and center, which hadn't happened up to that point in my life. So that was terrific. That was a great thing that they did. But truly, the gift of that kind of early adolescent, early childhood experience for me was the the desire that grew from that to observe other families and to go to friends' houses and say, aha, this is how it works here. And I didn't realize that it could be done this way. So I'm grateful that I had those people in my life that I could look to. And I was like a little anthropologist, just collecting information everywhere I went.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's obvious when you say it, and I think obvious if we're sort of being objective. Like, yeah, when you separate, you want to make it as easy as you can on your parents, but on your kids. I'm sorry, but with when you have a relationship that's ending, and no matter what the reason, I mean, it can be very easy to lose sight of that. So I do think it's important, and I like that you said, well, it's obvious, but by the same token, it's
It's
not
obvious,
always easy
but
to implement.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure for many people, there are so many other priorities that it can feel like I'll communicate with my kid later. But right now, what needs to happen is we need to get out of here, or we need to find a new place to stay, or we need to, I need to deal with my own anger or betrayal or whatever it may be. And all of that is probably true that you do need to do all of those things. But I think you can lose sight of what the child will experience and retain for a long time if it's not managed
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Really, really interesting. I want to dive into your book, Eight Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success, because I think that's a poignant topic. We all know that our kids are going to stumble sometimes, or if we start thinking about it, we understand, or we look at our childhood, say, oh, I stumbled a couple times. So I'd love for you to share maybe a common setback that kids face and how it can be turned into a character building opportunity.
Sure. So my pulling back just for a minute to get like a macro view, my hope with this book is that parents aren't afraid to talk about their kids screwing up, because all the parents I spoke with for this book said the moment they started feeling better about what their child was experiencing was the moment they talked to someone about it, and they didn't shroud it in secrecy or shame or embarrassment or whatever it might be. So certainly not to go blast it on Facebook, but to find a trusted person or two you can confide in, I think is really important. An example from the book, there are 8 different archetypes of ways that kids sort of universally experience failure in adolescence. And it might be a failure to connect with their peers, it might be a failure to connect with their family, or a failure to show concern for others. So there are lots of these that anyone listening would recognize if they have teens. You probably have a child who's been one of these archetypes or more at one point, and then they shift and try another one on for size. So perfectly normal to do all of this. Let's take, for example, failure to connect with peers. This is a heartbreaking one for parents. So your child might be a really great human being, and they are a really good member of your family, and you get along well, but they can't find their people and they're lonely, or they've been iced out by a friend group and you're watching them suffer from that. That is so difficult for parents to watch. And what ends up happening often is that parents will feel that pain so deeply, possibly even rooted in some of their own childhood memories. And what they do then is they over explore that with their kids. I call it pressing the bruise. They're so worried that every time their kid leaves to go to school, they're like, hey, don't forget that kid in your French class sounded really nice. Maybe you could sit with them when you go to lunch, right? It's this effort to try to help your kid find connection. And it's honest and heartfelt and well-meaning, but it signals to the kid that something is wrong with them and that their social success has a bearing on their parents' happiness. It causes them some anxiety and some stress that their child isn't settled with their peers. So then that tends to reverberate, and then the kid feels worse. And then the kid thinks, maybe I'm not good at making friends. This is sort of what I'm hearing, is that I'm not good at this. So that is where we get into kind of a failure territory for kids, where this could be something that they not only experience, but begin to believe as a truth about themselves. And we don't want that. So the book is framed on this simple 3-step process that parents and kids can do together. And it's called Contain, Resolve, and Evolve. And you do those 3 steps, and then hopefully it gives your child some experience and some confidence to understand that they can grow from this experience and that they aren't just stuck there and this is the headline of their childhood.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'd be curious to explore those 3 steps a little more, with the lens of wanting to be empathetic, wanting to put yourself in your child's shoes without pushing the bruise. I love that metaphor, as you're saying, because that does seem like a challenge. I mean, how often do you bring it up? How do you bring it up? Things like that.
Right. So, okay. So, for example, if we looked at this failure to connect with peers. So, contain is the first step. And I like parents to think about this as if they were watching a tennis match and the ball were bouncing back and forth. So, contain, the ball is in your court. This means you need to do something. You recognize we are getting into a situation here that is potentially harmful to my child. Maybe they're going to think a certain way about themselves. In some other examples in the book, maybe they're going to actually get physically hurt. There are lots of ways that this could present a danger in some way to your kid. So let's say you identify this is an issue. My child is really having trouble connecting with peers. So you're going to contain the problem. And that could mean, in some cases, containing the kid, and in some cases, containing an issue so that it doesn't grow, or containing a threat that's coming at them. In the case of not connecting with peers, it's probably containing a belief. We don't want that belief to grow that they are someone who can't connect with other people, right? So you can do that through conversation, you can do that through action, but you really have to sort of bring it up and mark it, right? So it seems to me that this is something that is bothering you. You're struggling with it a little bit. Don't allude to it bothering you. When parents say things they think sound empathetic, but make it about them. So I'm from Boston originally, but I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so the Southeast. And people here will say this. I don't know if this pertains to other parts of the country as much, but the phrase would sound something like, it hurts my heart when you're hurting, right? So any kind of variation on that, it hurts me when you're in pain, feels like I'm teaming up with you from your angle. From your child's angle, it sounds like my pain is causing you pain. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I'm already in enough pain. I don't want to add on to your burden and feel like now I'm making it worse. So be careful around that kind of language, but you can contain it by just saying, seems like this is something that's bothering you. Let's talk about ways that I can support you working through this. Resolve, the ball bounces to the other side of the court. Now your kid needs to take some action. A child can quickly lapse into something called learned helplessness, where they believe something about themselves and so they stop trying because they feel pain or discomfort. This is well researched that our natural response to pain or discomfort is to suffer through it. We will say, ouch, that hurts. I'm going to sit and deal with it until it goes away. That's our initial response. Unless we are conditioned to have a response, try to stop the pain, and we get a positive reaction. So there's great research around college kids being exposed to really horrible noises. And if they go and press a button and the button works and it turns the noise off, they learn, aha, when I'm in pain, I can do something about it and I feel better. In some of the experiments, the button doesn't work. Those kids press that button, the noise never stops. The next time in an experiment they're exposed to something painful, they don't even try. They just say, ouch, I'll just sit here until it ends. You don't want that for your kid. So it's very important in the resolve phase, you ask them to take a little action, to try something to stop the pain or discomfort. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but if they try, they will learn, I can try, which is so important. And then evolve, it bounces back to your side of the court, and you need to move past this because you don't want your kid to feel like this is who they are. And like every time they leave the house, you're going to ask them, did you make a new friend today? So you can either mark that by saying, you did great. I'm so happy that you reached out to 2 kids to do something this weekend. It stinks that they were busy, but that was so cool of you to try. And I'm not going to ask you again. Maybe we'll touch base next month. But for now, I'm super proud of you. And leave it at that. It sounds simple, but we're really building a muscle here. And so it's just kind of like daily exercise.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful, and I love the 3 steps and being so prescriptive as you were saying in your introduction. Like you follow the 3 steps, and it's not easy, but it's fairly it's simple at least that you can keep track of, and uh, that answers my question as well, because that is kind of the balance of where you want to feel empathy, you want to show empathy, uh, but right, I mean those are great. Great
Yeah, you want
approach.
to show empathy, but you don't want to show your own pain or discomfort. That goes to your friends or your partner if you have one, but not down to your kid.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, are there any particular setbacks that are, more challenging to learn from or to transform positively? Any big ones that you sometimes see where it's like, yikes, if you could cut this one off before it happens, or
I mean, I think truly it depends on the kid. I think that the ones that I think are the hardest for parents to handle are the one I just mentioned. And then the child who fails to take care of their body. So, in some way, if they are experimenting with substances, or if they are a daredevil and you have been to the ER one too many times for a broken bone, or they won't wear a helmet when they're out on their bike, or whatever it might be, if you are concerned about them being in bodily harm, that is an anxiety that is hard for a parent to let go of, because ultimately that could mean not just, oh, my kid has poor self-esteem, but my kid didn't make it home, which is really the ultimate terror, right, for us parents. So that one is one that is really hard. But again, just like the examples I gave you, the range here on all of these setbacks can be wide and depends on the kid. So, maybe a kid who goes skateboarding and doesn't wear a helmet. It may be a kid who's binge drinking, right? Those are all failure to take care of your body, but they're manifesting in pretty different, vast ways. So I think that that's one that parents want to jump on pretty early, and probably starts with figuring out why your child is such a risk taker. And that can be a wonderful quality. Impulsivity gets a bad rap, but without impulsive people, we wouldn't have EMTs, we wouldn't have firefighters, we wouldn't have, entrepreneurs, artists, lots of people that we need in our society. So if you feel that your child has this sort of streak towards less regard for their physical well-being, then I think having really open, honest conversations about that early is not going to put something on your child's radar that should make you nervous. I think it's going to make them willing to talk to you when they are actually in danger, which is what we want. We want to keep our doors open for that.
So start the conversations early and kind of have, like you're saying, have it on your radar.
Yeah, and less sort of condemning and more curiosity. So less, you know better. I cannot believe you did that. Why in the world would you take a stupid dare and jump off of a roof? And more, tell me what you were thinking about. Describe the situation before it happened. What did it feel like in your belly? What did it feel like in your head? I want to know that. What does it feel like now? And sort of processing it so that your impulsive child can then sort of go through it again with you and relive it and say, I did notice that I was feeling super amped, or that I was thinking this, or, and maybe they can tune into their own body a little better next time.
Yeah, no, I love that balance, not even balance, just the being curious versus condemning. I mean, it's easy because, I think there's some fear when something's going wrong. So it's, the natural impulse might be more to condemn. But in the long term, even probably in the short and middle term, you're going to be closing off communication, right? I mean,
that's right. And this is a circumstance where that contain step, the first step, might need to be swift, and it might need to be an actual border. You might say, you're not going out this weekend. Like if your kid crashed the car because they were driving recklessly, they don't get right back in the car. Again, there are certain safety parameters that you will have to put around this in the beginning. But I think the mistake that many parents make is they say, I did it. I tackled that one. We took away the car keys. Done. And that's really just the first step. The part that we care most about is resolve. And that's where the child has to do something. In this case, perhaps they have to earn your trust again. So maybe you need to drive together some more. Maybe they need to do a little research, and report back to you on something. Maybe they have a misunderstanding about how something works. There's a menu of options in the book that you can look through and say, here, I've contained it. Now the ball's in your court. You do something here to make amends, to pay for the damage, to earn trust again, to understand the situation better, whatever it may be. And then you get to evolve, the final step, where you ultimately have to let them try again, even though that's terrifying. But they're not going to stay locked up in your home forever. So the world is scary and humans are fragile, but that's really what we're doing. Again, building that muscle and building that capability to keep trying and keep failing until suddenly you aren't failing anymore.
Yeah, no, I love that approach. And, the 8 Setbacks book, I like how it's prescriptive. Like you're saying, there's contain, resolve, evolve. There's very specific tools you can use. And it's, gives you the tools so you can be reactive in some ways. So you understand how to act, how to help your child when they need help, in the most positive way for them, and for you and for us. And then I love the book 14 Talks by Age 14, which I almost, would do the flip side, where it's like proactive. It's okay, these are things that we need to address, or that should be addressed by a parent, that can be really helpful. So I think that's a nice kind of bookend of those two books. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit. So what are a couple, I mean, the topics from the book are awesome. talking about independence, changing friendships, taking care of yourself, technology, sexuality, money, hard work. I mean, all like goes. You just cover great topics that, when you read the topics, you're like, oh yeah, I do need to talk about this. I do need to talk about that. But it's easy to let them get, just to let life happen. So that's
Sure.
why I really love how you structured that book. What are a couple of the pivotal topics that you notice that parents maybe overlook, but that are crucial?
So, independence, I think, is a really big one. That's one that I hear a lot about from parents. A lot of confusion where they say, "I guess my kid just doesn't like me anymore. They just don't want to hang out," and that feels that way for sure. I'm not saying that it doesn't feel that way, but this chapter is really about first having an understanding of why this is happening and what it looks like. So it will typically look like either isolation or exploration. That's what independence looks like. So isolation is when your kid starts to cocoon in their room. They don't want to hang out with you and watch TV anymore. They aren't going to show up to family game night. They want to be, alone in their room doing their thing. And that feels to a lot of parents like a rebuff and like a rejection. And really, it's not. It's a way of practicing being an adult with the ultimate safety net. You're just upstairs. You're pretending it's your apartment, but it's your bedroom, and you're spending a lot of time alone. And, we all did it. I know for me, it was like practicing doing my hair. Just if I had had YouTube tutorials back in the day, I would have been on there nonstop doing makeup and hair. But I was like, how do I want to look as a teenager? What do I want to, what do I want to present myself as? And so an inordinate amount of time spent on my bangs in my room. And parents probably hear that and think, I wish it were bangs. It's the phone. But it's the phone as a conduit to how do I want to present myself to the world as an adult? I'm going to explore everything on here to figure out what I want to say about myself. So with that comes with good and bad things, but that's the isolation part of independence. And then exploration is I don't want to be home. I want to be out in the world by myself or out in the world with my friends. I want to bike to the store alone. I want to go to the mall without you. I want to go to this party and don't call the other parents, before I go. So those two things are difficult for parents, understandably, because it's a real big shift, but they are such an important, really wonderful part of the way your child discovers who they are as a grown-up, starting at a pretty young age. So that's probably my favorite, least understood or least discussed topic in the book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the isolation / exploration, sides of the coin are pretty interesting to think about. And then when bring up things like family night or family game night, whatever it is, how important or how much would you push to say, hey, I want you to be a part of the family and join some of these activities versus letting them go off and be kind of independent, as you put it?
So I think it's really important that you enter an age of negotiation and compromise here. I think it's a great opportunity to show your child how to do it well, how to do it without emotional blackmail, how to do it without, guilt and bribery and, any of those things. But just to say, I love that you are becoming more independent and that I have a room that you love spending time in and that you have friends you love exploring your world with. That is important to me that you have those things. And I want to continue to give you opportunity to explore and to be in your room as much as possible. And I love you and you are an important part of our family. And we also need some time with you because we care for you and we miss you when you're not around. And so, happy to keep giving you these opportunities. In return, we ask you to participate in some of our stuff too, because we're not the same without you. So, you can decide on what feels like a fair split. I might think in a 50-50 kind of term or work towards that, negotiate towards that. Or maybe it's I would love for you to be at one of every 3 game nights or one of every 4, and in return you can go hang out with your friends, and could you maybe fit me in for a dog walk on Sundays. But if you negotiate that way, your child will understand that you're not trying to stop them from doing the things they are developmentally pulled towards doing, but that you really like and enjoy their company and you want to send them off, but you also need to spend a little time with them because you enjoy them.
Yeah, I love that, the negotiation tactic. I mean, that just really resonates. That sounds like a great approach, where you're reaching a middle ground, I guess, like as negotiation should, where you both feel like you've won and no one felt like they lost, and you've got to a place where you're both, somewhat satisfied with the outcome. That's a great
Yeah,
approach.
I think it might make some parents uncomfortable that their child is getting some say in their schedule that way. But I think it's important to remember that we are teaching them through this process. We're not giving up and we're not saying, I roll over, you make the rules now. We're showing them how negotiation works. And that's an important part of being in relationship and in community with others. So it begins at home with you, and then they will take those good skills to their relationships, friends and romantic partners and bosses and all kinds of things down the road. So if you can look at it that way, it's such a good opportunity, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one thing we talk about on the podcast when we talk about, adolescence is, you can't just jump into raising an adolescent. Um, you need to be preparing for it. You need to be keeping the conversations open before that, right? You can't just, okay, now that you're 14 and you're not talking to me, we need to talk, right? Like, so there's preparation that needs to happen before they reach that, crucial age. And so I'd be curious how you'd recommend parents with younger kids start to talk to their kids about topics, and maybe if there are a couple topics that you think resonate more with like a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old or something like that, but to keep the lines of communication open as opposed to trying to open them once they really need it.
Yeah. I think the important skill to develop, back to this idea of curiosity, is that you're a great listener and you're very curious and you're good at asking questions and you're not trying to make every moment a teachable moment. So if your communication is built on teaching a lesson, I need to impart this very important piece of advice or wisdom or this way of operating in the world to my child, which we all want to do, right? That's the desire. But how do we go about doing that? If you are just sort of putting out lessons all the time, your child's going to close down to receiving that. But even at ages 6 and 8, if you approach their point of view with a real curiosity, how did that feel when that happened? Why do you think people do that sometimes? What's another way you could have responded to that? These kind of open ended, let me explore your brain and how it's working and what it's thinking without saying, no, 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 we should never do that. No, 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 we would never yell at someone if we were upset, which, you know, maybe you do yell at someone sometimes when you're upset. So just sort of starting to have these conversations around showing your child that they are a good conversation partner, that you're curious about what they think, that you don't overreact emotionally when they say something. So, one of the big tools that I have, regardless of topics, is something I call Botox brow. And it's this idea that in early adolescence, there's so many things that get rewired in a kid's brain. The part of the brain that they use to read facial expressions is not the one they use during the teenage years. Not so. Typically, we would use the prefrontal cortex to read facial expressions, and adults do very well using that part of the brain, looking at someone's face and saying, "You look angry," or "You look happy." Teens can't do that very well because the prefrontal cortex is rewiring. So they have to use their amygdala to read facial expressions. The amygdala is where all of their emotions live, and it's full of drama. And so they often will look at a face and see anger where there is none. So parents, starting when their kids are really young, let's say at age 8, should begin practicing talking to their kids without making a real emotional face. So if you screw up your face when you talk to your child and you wrinkle your forehead, maybe you're doing that because you want to show that you're focused. Maybe you're doing that because that's your empathetic look, but your child will see that wrinkled forehead and read it as anger, and they'll stop talking to you and they'll be like, why are you mad? When your kids are young, practice having what I call a Botox brow. So I say, pretend you're a celebrity on a late night talk show and you've been so overly Botoxed, you can't move your forehead. Just have it be flat and neutral. Your kids will love this. For over 20 years, this has been the thing that parents have told me, wow, my kids are really starting to talk to me more now because I'm doing that Botox thing. So that's my number one tip. And then in terms of what topics to address, the big one I think is around mental health. So parents are very afraid to bring up suicide and self-harm with young kids. They think it's going to create thoughts in their head that they wouldn't have had otherwise. It does the opposite. So experts say even as young as age 8, kids can understand the concept of suicide and self-harm. And if you begin early showing them, it doesn't freak me out to talk about this with you. Even if you had a thought that you were thinking about this, it wouldn't scare me for you to say that to me. I would know where to go to get help. So if you can convey a certain amount of confidence in these topics that are terrifying naturally to us, I think that will serve you so well in the long run. Your kid will remember, my parent doesn't freak out when I come to them with tough topics.
That's great. That's really poignant and important. And like you're saying, that's the hardest topic probably, but that's why it's so, poignant and important. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And, switching gears a little bit. So you've created this, camps with some really fascinating curriculum, which I really liked a lot. Things like redefining leadership, responding to criticism, taking compliments, exiting toxic friendships. So I'd love if you could just maybe touch on, maybe exiting toxic friendships, handling emotional flare-ups, kind of how those are taught and what's conveyed there.
Sure. So in the camps, the structure is such that, we have two ways that we do the camps. We have a Zoom option for kids anywhere. And then most of the camps are in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am, although we've had people set up satellite camps in other cities. But in person, it's set up so that you do 2 lessons a day from the kinds that you just mentioned. And then there are loads of games and activities that kind of support that theme for the day. So a lesson might last 45 minutes to 2 hours. I'm going to say 45 minutes for the boys who are ready to move on to gameplay pretty quickly, and 2 hours sometimes for the girls who are like, I have another story about a girl who was mean to me. And that goes on and on and on. So it's sort of a slumber party feel there. The exiting toxic friendships is one that tends to blow the girls' minds. So this is for girls who are in 5th through 8th grade. And they tend to believe that if they are in a friendship with someone who makes them feel really bad about themselves, nothing can be done. They just have to suffer through that. This is just a person they might need socially. They'll be, ostracized if they don't stay friends with this person. They have some social power within their small group. And they don't know where they would be. They would be alone if not for this person. So if they are in sort of a toxic frenemy situation where a friend makes them feel really bad, more than they make them feel good about themselves, what can they do about it? And what we do is first we talk about how do you kind of diagnose if your friendship is making you feel good or bad. So it's really about tuning into how you feel, noticing that and marking it. And then what can you do? And what you can do is so simple, but kids don't realize it. You cannot be available to people who treat you badly. So if someone says, hey, can you hang out? Can I come over? And kids will find themselves either just saying, yeah, sure. They don't want to. They feel like they have to say yes, or they get into a web of lies. So they'll say, I can't because I have to clean my room. And then the other kid will say, I'll come over and help you clean the room. And then they're like, well, my mom is also sick. And then they compound these things with more and more lies. And really what we need to teach kids is just to say, I can't today. And so there's a little exercise that we do where they repeat this and they practice, and their minds are blown. They're like, we played it out a few times, and finally the person said, okay. And that was it. I can't believe it was that easy.
Wow. No, and so do you recommend saying, I mean, you just said it, I guess, I can't today versus I don't want to because of how you're making me feel? You
Yeah,
like
you
the
can do
simple.
that too. And we talk about that. There are, every kid has a different comfort level with what they're okay doing. And I never want to push a kid past their comfort level there for two reasons. One, I want them to build, and I want it to be like a ladder. So it might start with, I can't today. And maybe then they get enough confidence later to say, I can't, and here's why. But it's baby steps. So it's kind of like I was saying earlier with teaching the kids to press the button to take some action, so that they learn when they feel pain or discomfort that they can take some action. And the action may be imperfect in many ways. I'm less concerned about that and more concerned about building that muscle so that they say, I know that when things aren't going well, I can do something, even if it's the most minor thing, which is excuse yourself from
Mhm.
it. So we go over a variety of options, and then they get to pick whatever they're comfortable with. Most kids aren't comfortable in middle school with your behavior is not up to my standards, buddy, right? They'll get there in high school most likely, but in middle school they'll start just by kind of excusing themselves.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So the other topic I wanted to address real quick from your camps are media influence, because that's one kids are finding at a younger and younger age. And maybe if you could define how you define that at your camp and kind of what you prescribe at a high level, that'd be really, I think, interesting.
Sure. This has evolved. These camps have been around for 20 years, and it used to be that it wasn't social media influence, it was media influence, much more sort of as we all understood it as we were growing up. So, advertisements and things like that. And I love covering this topic because it gets into a bit of adolescent psychology that is so fun and devious, which is kids love to prove adults wrong. They really do. And I want to tap into that, and I want to light that fire in their belly, and I want them to be curious and a little skeptical of what they're being told by big business. And so I used to do it with advertisements, and I would say, okay, here's the message that they're sending to someone your age. Do you think it's true? Do you think it's fair what they're assuming about you? Do you believe what they're saying about you in this ad? And so we would talk about that, and just, it was really an exercise in getting them to pause and think critically about what they were being sold, how the other person was making money off of them. Are you being monetized? What does that feel like? Because money is a big, it's one of the chapters in the 14 Talks book, but it's a big piece of power for young people when they start babysitting or mowing lawns or whatever it might be. That is the first step into independence for them. And to be parted with their money is a big deal. So I want them to be thoughtful about that. Anyway, that's how it started. Now it is much more social media. So talking about ads on social media platforms, and then talking about other ways that social media can be used to tell you something about yourself that may not be true. So that can be around body image, that could be around friendship, that could be around any kind of you know misinformation in the news, that kind of stuff. And often it boils down to, is this person making money off of you here by telling you you need this weight loss tea or this pre-workout supplement to get bigger, or whatever it might be. So that's that.
I like that. No, that's like you're saying, if camps have been around for 20 years, the topic has had to evolve since, social media is such a big part. YouTube is such a big part of our kids' lives now.
Yeah, and
That's fascinating.
YouTubers, kids don't think of that as a person's money stream. They think, this guy's cool, I trust what he says. He says to drink this sport drink, so I will. And he has all this evidence for why I should drink this sport drink, And I'm like, and he's making money off of every time you buy that sport drink. So that's okay if you like that sport drink, but do you?
Right.
I just
Right.
want
Is
them
it
to
good
think
for
about
you?
it. I just
Yeah.
really, really want them to think.
Right. Yeah. And that seems to be a common thread through a lot of your topics is independent thinking and being able to stand up for yourself and become a leader of yourself, and that would be the last topic I'd be real curious to just ask you about. I know you have this redefining leadership as a topic, and I'd be curious how, parents can help their kids, redefine leadership in their own lives. Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I think kids have a sort of black and white understanding of what leadership is. And they think, oh, a leader is a person who's in charge of a lot of people. So that's the captain of the team, or the most popular kid in the cafeteria, or the smartest kid in the class. And what I want kids to start thinking about is that you are the leader of your own life. You can think independently, as you said, and critically, as you said, to make decisions for yourself rather than thinking about, well, this is what that sport drink that guy drinks, so I'll drink it too, right? Or this is what everybody else is doing, so I'll do it too. So it's really about nurturing that kind of inner rebelliousness that kids already have and getting them to apply that to their method of thinking. Do I want to be told what to do? Or do I want to think for myself? Most teens want to think for themselves, and they don't realize sometimes when they're not doing that. So parents can have that conversation in a mostly in a way about other things. It's hard for kids to hear parents talk about them. So, if you say to your kid, I've noticed you're doing a lot of X, Y, or Z. Do you really like that? Your kid's going to be like, screw you. Yes, of course, I really like it, right? But if you talked about people on TV, or people who probably are not friends with your kids, because that they will instantly feel a sense of loyalty and have to defend their friends' choices, but someone more removed, then you could say, well, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Or just globally, to be curious, what are your thoughts on vaping? Do you think that as many kids are doing it as parents think are, or do you think we're overblowing that? Tell me, what are they teaching you in health class about it? Do you think it's accurate, or do you think that they're not getting their news from good resources? So asking kids to think about topics that you want to talk about in a way that positions them to be expert thinkers and critical thinkers is a really good way to start redefining their sense of leadership in their own life.
That's fantastic. And, we keep going back to the topic of curiosity, and as a parent, how valuable being curious is, as opposed to being judgmental or condemning or whatever it is. I think that's really a wise approach, and one that we could all learn from. Michelle, this has been tremendous. Again, the author of Middle School Makeover, Improving the Way You and Your Child Experience the Middle School Years, which we didn't touch on as much, but then the 2 books, 14 Talks by Age 14, Being Proactive, and 8 Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success, What to Do and What to Say to Turn Failures into Character Building Moments. Somewhat reactive, but also it's important tools to have in your parenting toolbox, so to speak. So I love these books. Your camp topics are awesome. You can learn more and find about all these on Michelle's website, michelleicard.com. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. I loved talking with you. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.